Well, thanks, Chris, for taking me back to the Olympics, because it was absolutely fantastic. And also for this opportunity to speak to you all today. I spent the entire year, as you'll hear, stuck in my operations centre, dealing to begin with fuel tanker drivers, rolling into the Olympics, most recently prison officers, bubbling up with fuel tanker drivers, and now prison officers again. And so the chance to get out and speak here in a day in London is great, so thank you for that. I also did manage to get to the Olympics on a couple of occasions. I saw those good Yorkshire lads, so the Brownleys, win the triathlon, and I saw Ellie Simmons in the win her 400-metre race. So I did escape a little bit, but not as much perhaps as I would have liked. So as I've just intimated, this year, 2012, has been an unprecedented year for defence engagement in UK resilience operations. And as we look ahead, there are a large number that are already inbound. And as a result of this sort of intensive activity, if you like, there are a clear number of lessons that have been identified, Ronnie, but I don't know whether we are going to properly pick them up and turn them into lessons learned, because I do suspect that already people have moved on and are looking to other things. But the three things that I'm really going to cover now is the need to establish early a defined requirement, the command and control structures, and how most effectively to employ these defence capabilities. And so I'll just draw on these three things that I've just talked about that have taken place during this last year to draw out those 3 points, really. A little bit on policy and the journey that we've been on. Of course, although you all out there have a legal responsibility to be prepared under the Civil Contingencies Act, defence is not categorised as a responder. We have no legal obligation. We have to respond at best effort. And of course, one could have some interesting discussions about what is best effort, and it's certainly best effort changes. For us to be employed, we have to have a Defence Council order, so there's got to be a legal basis for this. So what is national importance? The Olympics, yeah, for sure. But what proportion of the fuel supply is national importance? And when are we in this dodgy space of industrial action, strike breaking, versus actually doing the right thing by the country? And of course, the way that the government plays shops, the charging regime, that we have to charge full costs for people that are already paid and perhaps not doing everything. And that playing of shops between government departments is a source of frustration. And then this year, of course, there's massive growth in demand. I would not have known at the start of the year that I would suddenly become an expert on the UK fuel distribution system, but I am. We then, of course, rolled into the Olympics, which I've been obviously closely involved in for some time, so that was a known, but of course, G4S created its own challenges, but that was fine. And then, of course, prison officers and covering off industrial action across the whole of the prison estate was where I'm at the moment. And, of course, we do our normal stuff, from support to April Jones, the missing girl in Wales, to the normal routine EUD and search stuff that just goes on. And then as we look ahead, we've got, in Northern Ireland, the G8 Summit. We've got the World Police and Fire Games, both next year. Apparently that's the 4th biggest sporting event in the world. And in 2014, of course, the Commonwealth Games are coming to Scotland. We've already had our first all-day meeting with Strathclyde Police on that one. And then as well as those knowns, there's a whole bunch of those top 4 risks in the National Risk Assessment that are out there. East Coast flooding is one that I'm paying a particularly close attention to, and we'll be working with our partners out east to look at that. So firstly, then, establishing the requirement. And what we have certainly found throughout this year is that defence is well placed to bring coherence to this multi-agency, cross-government requirement setting and planning. But there has been a tension, and there always is a tension between the military's desire to plan, because we're great planners, and the last-minute, just-in-time approach that can take place. And of course, you saw that in space with G4S, leaving it, just too late rather than just in time. And there's this big gap between the strategic level, the Prime Minister in Cobra, delivering down at the tactical level, and this gulf in the middle. Christina's gone, but the Cabinet Office, the coordination role, working with other government departments, and there is this huge gap that we sense in the government machinery to what we would call operational gearing, the operational level of command in defence. We also discovered that the national Plans are not really very good. So we cast over the National Emergency Plan for fuel, completely in need of significant work, I would suggest. And as I probably turned the stone on others, I'm sure we would find likewise. And of course, we've heard about risk and how ministerial appetite for risk falls. Of course, it wasn't even going to be there for the Olympics. We knew that. But as other things get closer, it falls and falls and falls. My attitude to risk is that the greater the risk, the higher the glory. So as I tell my team to keep pushing on as the latest bow wave of activity comes in our direction. And the other thing I think on this requirement thing is that the government is very inputs focused. There are 1,800 fuel tanker drivers, therefore you need 1,800 drivers. G4S had 12,000 people, therefore you need 12,000 people, rather than leaving us to say this is the effect that we want you to achieve. And having that dialogue, particularly with some influential government ministers, and getting them to trust us to deliver the effect rather than provide a numbers solution is always a challenge. Next thing, command and control. So cross-government architecture, as you will all well know, is pretty complex, overlapping. To us in the military, it's not always clear as who's responsible to who for what. The first question we always say is who's in charge? Because we like to know who's in charge and what the part in the plan is. And that's actually in a multi-agency, coordinated, partnership sharing sort of way that is good to do business, does cause us a degree of frustration and cause us to sit on our hands and behave and try and talk normally and not trying to leap to the front as some military folk clearly like to do. The other thing that we discovered is that the government machinery and this massively long screwdriver, forensic detail required from COBRA, for example, when we were training fuel tanker drivers, they wanted to know if a single person not passed a course that I tried, why haven't they passed the course? I mean, why does the Prime Minister need to know that level of forensic detail? But these are the sort of questions that we get asked all the time. You spend so much time feeding the beast upwards rather than getting on and delivering effects downwards, a source of huge frustration. But what we did find is that this operational level that we run in the Standing Joint Commander works really well, and we were able to be that interface between the strategic COBRA level, if you like, and then the tactical delivery down on the ground. And a result of that, we have a case in to just develop slightly the size of my team so that we can do a little bit more forward planning, because at the moment, there are only 9 of us. We can either deliver something with augmentation or we can do a bit of planning. We can't do both. And out of that fall a couple of questions for defence is, should defence, treat UK operations in the same way we treat war fighting overseas with our command and control structures, and the sort of same the way that we do business, and also how can we help shape this more cross government coordination, because I think there's still more scope for that, and Christina's not here to answer that. Then on to our capabilities. One thing that we would definitely say as a result of this year is that our planning and command and control are national capabilities that have actually proved hugely useful. We embedded teams into local and G4S during the Olympics. We embedded teams into the Department of Energy and Climate Change as we did our work on fuel tanker drivers. And of course, we've worked very closely with the Ministry of Justice for prison officers. And getting people in there has been a really useful capability. And I want to try and take that further, develop that capability, and in fact it was one of the things that was identified way back in the SDSR a few years ago. Another capability which obviously was hugely useful was organised mass, because that's what we do. We can bring formed bodies of disciplined personnel with their own integral logistic support, command and control structure to go and do stuff. It doesn't have to be complicated stuff, but you can trust us to do the stuff that you want us to do without any fuss and just getting on with it. And the importance of logistics, again, was another thing that Chris has mentioned as well. A huge logistical challenge was borne out. And of course, you use us now for our specialist capabilities, the Special Forces, EOD and search, but we also developed a range of capabilities specific for the Olympics around the air and maritime domains, and it's questions nationally is what do we want to do about those capabilities? Do we want to sustain them, or will we let them just wither away as the skill fades? And also UK operations are not currently force driving. In other words, the structure of the armed forces is not based upon what we have to do at best effort in the UK operations space. Should we be slightly more structured slightly differently to be able to have a better effect rather than just as see what's available when the ask comes? So looking a little bit ahead to the future, as I've already mentioned, there's a few things inbound. There's for sure that the ask of defence will continue. Of course, and we've mentioned the G8 summit that's coming out on the Commonwealth Games. But there is this real opportunity to leverage this Olympics legacy. One would hope so. And achieve greater integration between the civil authorities and other government departments from the good ways of working that came about, these unique organisations that were conceived and then proved that they could deliver, although as Christina and Chris, we were never stress tested during the Olympics in terms of a major incident, but the mechanisms were in place, I'm sure, that would have been able to deal with any form of incidents. And within ourselves, within Defence, the Standing Joint Commander, which is the team that I run, is best placed within Defence, and I think that Defence have finally put to bed, should we have a PGHQ home, where should this be, and actually we have proven that we can deliver this effect probably on no bigger scale, and so I think that's been finally put to bed, and we'll now look to see how we can further develop and reinforce a little more in terms of my headquarters. And then also questions, is there a will to do more? I mentioned the air and the maritime security side, but also, how far down this industrial action route are we going? What are those things that we deem to be of national importance that we would want the military? And I know that some people would say, other than the ones I've mentioned, the ability to drive the tubes, for example. Not that I'm volunteering at all for the guard room, but there are a few of these niche areas that a few people that can cause an awful lot of pain for an awful lot of people. And how do we want to take that forward? Because there is this increased appetite to users. So just to summarise, firstly, political appetite. There definitely has been an increased political appetite to use defence. There is no doubt that when they use us, they expect us to succeed and do whatever we have to do to succeed, because when you're using the last resort, then we must not fail. No second prizes for coming second on the battlefield, no second prizes for coming second in industrial action either. And there was no doubt that my boss, General Sir Nick Parker, when the Prime Minister looked at him, we would do whatever we had to do to deliver 100% of the fuel distribution capability. No matter how out of shape we were to bend ourselves to do that, and we did bend ourselves out of shape, but we would have delivered it. There's no doubt about that. The risk of UK operations has been recognised into the reorganisation and restructuring that's going on in defence. As you know, we're facing, like the rest of you, significant cuts. By April 15, 1 in 5 of us will have been made redundant. But we are, in our new structures, putting in place the ability to respond to UK operations, but there just won't be as many of us to do that. There's definitely a degree of institutional resistance. As I mentioned, the SDSR said that we should perhaps produce this cross-government contingency planning team. That's not been set up yet, and we've been trying to push that one forward. We've learned a lot. We can deliver the effect. And people have recognised that value of multi-agency working within defence as well. Finally, across the purists of the war-fighting light blue, dark blue, and green aspects of defence recognise that there is a part that we have to play and we can play in UK operations. And we will probably be called too late. There's lots of politics that you'll be well aware of that is out there of should we, shouldn't we, will we make things worse if we call defence, and it's always that fine line, whether it's doing the right thing for a maxi cat A, threat to life, no problem at all. But when you're into the grey trade space of industrial relations, for example, much more difficult as how to call it, which is inevitably why we will probably be called too late. So the point for us is that we need to make sure that our structures, our liaison through the GRLO network, our command and control systems, and some basic preparedness are agile enough to be able to respond. And to do that, of course, we need to have a good understanding of the likely risks that are out there and just keep a weather eye on that. And of course, we do that quite closely. Good. That's it. On time, on budget.